Welcome to Trigger Talk, your place for everything first-person shooters like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and so much more. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic. In today's episode, we're talking about the finals season 2, some of the features there, what are our thoughts on the game and its place in FPS right now, as well as going over to Duty Calls, where we talk about if Call of Duty has lost the plot. So let's jump in. I want to start with, let's jump into Respawn Radio and talk about the finals. So we were talking about this before we started recording, about how the finals has just been, it's suffering because it is pretty just okay. Like there wasn't any big controversies really. The gameplay's pretty solid. The season pass details I think was the biggest like snafu that they had in terms of like, it took about 100 hours to go through the battle pass and it didn't really reward you that well. And then they realized that and gave a bunch of people like XP boosts so they could trim it down to 50 hours to finish the battle pass instead. But now we get into season 2. They've addressed a lot of these things. They've added a new mode, and generally it looks pretty fun.
Yeah, it's been a weird journey for that game where it had a lot of hype, and it, you know, during that open beta that it had, it, like, I don't know, I think it was like 260 odd thousand concurrent players at once. Like, it was doing really well, and then it launched pretty damn well too. And then it just kind of slowly dwindled down a little bit, and I'm not sure why, because it was good, and it's the same for me. I really like that game a lot, and then I just stopped playing it, and I genuinely don't know why. And like you said before we started recording, a lot of people seem to be sort of saying the same thing. A lot of creators are saying the same thing. I think that's maybe even a sort of a part of it, is that, you know, when a bunch of creators stop covering a game, that obviously stops a lot of the, I guess, it stops generating hype for the game. Usually like these days, that goes hand in hand. The more people, the more creators covering a game, the more popular it is, in most cases anyway. And so, yeah, it's been a weird time where I think it should be up there as one of the most exciting and most popular shooters right now, and it just like isn't. But I don't know why, because I don't have anything bad to say about it, and that's not me being an avid player that's shilling for it. I feel the same way. I really like it, but I just haven't really been playing it. And I genuinely don't know why, especially because I've been crying out for a shooter to play right now. I just played a heap of the X-Defiant open beta during the weekend. It's a weird time, and I'm not really sure what's going on with it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like a weird place to be in the space. Also, I was watching the trailers for Season 2, watching some gameplay on it, and it just struck me as odd that the game's rated T14. Like, it feels like a while since I've seen a game that's actually rated T14.
Yeah.
But that's just side tangent. But the actual game looks really good. I think they're finally getting into a groove of like why the game should be where it is. What does it look like for this game to be in this spot? We were talking before the podcast started recording about how it's like very Overwatchy. It's a combination of a lot of like existing games and experiences, and just kind of throws them together with a lot of the destruction that DICE used to be known for. And generally, like, it's very conducive to this kind of almost like secondary shooter. And maybe that's where maybe that's where it fails a little bit, is like there's a dwindling market for the secondary shooter type of experience. But I don't know. I'm gonna download the game in the second season and see how it goes, because I've just kind of been burnt out with a lot of first-person shooter games, Battlefield 2042 included, and this looks like a really good fresh breath of air.
Yeah, that's a good point, that it isn't quite that, like, it's not the big AAA typical Call of Duty, Halo, Battlefield type of game. And then there's still obviously like Fortnite and Apex and those sorts of games. And it isn't one of those games, and it's also not trying to be. I don't think it's trying to compete with those games.
Yeah, it's not pretending.
Yeah, and so maybe that is part of why it's not, I don't know, doing as well, because maybe for whatever reason people aren't as interested in that. I think it's kind of reminiscent of the entire gaming industry, that like there's a lot of really good games out there that are maybe more like AA than AAA, and people don't really care. And I don't understand why personally, because as much as I love the big AAA God of War Ragnarok, the big masterpiece type games, I love me a smaller game. I played Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown earlier this year. That's definitely more of like even though it's Ubisoft, but it's more of a AA game. It's a little side scroller. It took me about 20 hours to beat or something.
Yeah.
I love those games. I want more of those AA games that are that sort of in between, where they're not indie, but they're not these enormous blockbusters that are either God of War level that's like a freaking movie, or Red Dead 2 that's a 100-hour game. Sometimes I want that middle ground that is really good quality, but just not on that level. Yet most people don't seem to, and I'm not sure why. And I mean, it's a preference thing, so I can't really say like anyone's wrong for that, because it's just what people want. But it's always kind of confused me why that is kind of dying off. And I think it's probably just because of how good some of those, we had a really good patch there, probably from, I don't know, 2015 until maybe even, I guess you'd count last year, where there's just so many good, massive AAA games that we're now almost a bit brainwashed that is like the standard, when it kind of shouldn't be. Like, those games are elite games. Not every game can be that. And I think last year, because there was so many, it was such a big year of gaming. Because there's like 6 or 7 of those games, we're all like, all right, well, now everyone can do that, so that's what we expect. When really that was just a year where like the stars aligned and so many of those came out. So yeah, I think unfortunately that middle ground type of game that the final sort of is I don't want to say dying off, but I just mean it's not like at peak interest now, when it sort of has every right to be there. And
it's almost like the rom-com, like
that's
obviously you've got what's the Glenn Powell Sydney Sweeney movie, Anyone But You. That came out, was a huge success. It was like the first in a long gap of rom-com movies. They're middle budgets. They aren't indie movies. They aren't the big blockbusters, but they typically do well when they do come out. But it's because of streaming services, they just haven't been able to like really get them consistently out, just because of that dwindling market. But there's a market there for sure. I feel like that's the same case with something like the finals, and something like this is they're indie games, and people love to go to the indie games, and people love seeing the indie movies and stuff from like A24 or Neon or Fox Searchlight or whatever. And I feel like that's the case with a bunch of indie games on Steam. But then you get into like the Prince of Persias or anything like that, where they come from these established studios or have established people making them. And people are kind of like, oh, interesting. I've forgotten that this is a type of game that can come out. And I think the finals is in that kind of situation where it is a type of shooter that hasn't really been a big thing for a while, but does have the potential to like fill in that space and be that secondary shooter kind of experience.
Yeah, and I hope it definitely like keeps pushing on and can, I guess, entice people to come and try it out and eventually cement its spot there, because it definitely deserves it. It's probably one of the most well-made shooters I think I've played in, I don't know how long. Like, I could honestly go back nearly a decade at this point to maybe like, maybe Battlefield 1 is the last game to me that the last like such a high quality, really good shooter, because I can't remember any Call of Duties that are on that level. There's no other like smaller, that's kind of the point, is what I'm getting at. There's no other games that have done that. We've seen a lot of those games, like remember like World War 3, which I think is still not even out. There's also that was it Battalion 1944 that came out a few years ago that I think has sort of died off. There was, I'm forgetting the other one, but there was another one that kind of had a lot of interest, and then again, it just didn't really go anywhere. They're more like, those are more indie type of games, even though I'm not sure they're technically indie, but
yeah,
I think that's the issue, is that any game that comes out that isn't a big AAA game, we maybe see as like, oh, this will probably end up dying. I don't know if you've seen that Grey Zone Warfare game that was like in beta last week that is kind of the same. It just looks like an Escape from Tarkov type of game that I just look at and go, oh, I probably won't bother because it will probably die off pretty quick, and it doesn't look, as high quality as these other games. And so the finals probably falls into that, where people go, oh, well, it's not Call of Duty or whatever, so it'll die off, or it can't be that good or whatever, when it is a rung above those other games, in my opinion. I've played a lot of them, like the ones I just mentioned, I've pretty much played all of them. And the finals feels like a AAA game. I guess it maybe even is, because it's backed by a freaking Nexon, who are like a multi-billion
massive conglomerate. Yeah.
So I don't know what, like the term AAA has always confused me, because like I just said with Ubisoft making Prince of Persia, I see that game as a AA game, but it's Ubisoft. It's like one of the biggest franchises, one of the biggest companies in gaming. So, and even Prince of Persia itself, is everyone knows the name Prince of Persia. So
yeah,
I don't technically know what defines each, but I kind of see the finals as more of a AA shooter, but I guess it technically is AAA. But yeah, I don't know, but it definitely feels AAA to me, and that's why I'm kind of confused that it's not doing better than it is, because the player base has sort of really dwindled away. It's not like performing super poorly. It's just that it was doing really well. Now it's just kind of like, I think it gets around like 30,000 concurrent players on Steam, which is not bad. It's just not where it was. And yeah, it just makes me confused why it's not doing better. And the same, like I said for myself, it's confusing why I'm not playing it. Like I'm second guessing myself. And even I said to you before this, I'm like, I've got the itch after we've been talking about it to go back and play it. But I genuinely don't know why I stopped. I was having a blast. And then I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And it wasn't for any negative. It wasn't like, nah, that game's boring, or it's too broken, or it's not balanced, or whatever. There was nothing that made me do it. I don't know if it was just another single player game that came out or what, but yeah, I just stopped. I literally just randomly cold turkey stopped playing it, like out of absolutely nowhere. So it's a weird one. And I hope that they can sort of figure out maybe why people are doing that, and yeah, like stop that happening, because I think this game really deserves to stick around. I would love to see this for 5 to 10 years, just be supported, because it's it is genuinely a really, really good game, and it's also unique. It's not another, like, I've been talking up X Defiant a lot, but that game is essentially Call of Duty from Wish, and the finals isn't any game from Wish. It's its own thing. It has elements of other games, but it really does its own thing really well. So yeah, I hope it sticks around, and I think it will. It's just, I think it'll take a bit of time to find their footing and sort of really break into, cement its place, I guess.
Yeah, I know we talk about the finals and X Defiant usually in the same breath, but they are very different when you actually get to the nuts and bolts of it. I think generally in terms of the gap that they fill in the gaming FPS space, they're similar in that way, but in every other way, except for them being like first-person shooters, like they are quite different.
Yeah.
Like you said, X Defiant's very much classic COD, and then the finals is kind of like the best hits from the last decade in terms of FPS games that's kind of been molded into one, which is really great. But yeah, there's a lot that the finals can do. I think it's really robust in terms of like what directions it can take, and what it can add to the game. Like it's a small scale shooter. Like they can survive with a smaller player base and like still feel lively in terms of finding lobbies and that kind of stuff, just because of how the game's set up. But also they have the potential to get even bigger and do something even more interesting with it at the same time.
Yeah, that's something I've wondered about. I think this game would suit not necessarily a BR, but like that type of like a really intense mode where it's maybe everyone for themselves or more than just 3 or 4 teams like it is in a tournament where it's, 10 teams of 3 or something. I think it's perfect for it. And I'm not sure whether they will go that way. And I also, as much as I'd be keen for it, I partly hope they don't because they've found their own identity and I don't want them to just follow the trend. But yeah, I would love to see them do some sort of larger scale element, even like they've done a lot of limited time modes, so even if they did it as a limited time thing. But yeah, I think maybe that's the only area for me that it sort of lacks a little bit is it's 3v3 and you do have to play with your teammates, and I kind of wish there was something that was a bit less reliant on that, unless you want to make that your thing, like a BR, for example, where obviously you have to play with teammates and they can buy into that a little bit more, because obviously if everyone's going to play something like a BR or an extraction shooter, you're in that mindset. But in the 3v3 mode, it just kind of, I don't know, a lot of people aren't really wired that way, I guess.
Yeah, I also think that's why they added that new mode, which is kind of like very Overwatchy-esque in terms of like that platform that moves in. Because I think the biggest criticism that a lot of people have had is like feeling like they're constantly getting third-partied, and that's just not a thing with the new mode, which I think is nice. But like clearly they can experiment with all of these various ideas and experiences, indicated by the fact that we could see them doing a battle royale, or we could see them doing this kind of thing or this kind of thing. Like they've built up the foundation that they can do a ton with that game, and I would think be pretty successful with it. Yeah,
and the way that the game is so unique too, and we know that a lot of the devs are ex-DICE employees and stuff. From
apparently all the ones that wanted private matches too.
from the like good days of Battlefield as well. Like, I think there's enough innovation in that team from what I've played from the finals. I've probably clocked 150 hours, and it is a very unique and innovative game. I'd love to see them actually make their own spin on, like, I don't know, take the BR genre and like do a finals version of it where it just isn't at all like a BR, but it's got those sort of elements. And I think they could do that because, I think the BR genre is, I don't want to say the genre is dead, because obviously you look at Fortnite and like, I don't think the genre is dead. I think the new games, I think we've talked about this in the past, I think any new game trying to break into the BR genre is just dead on arrival, because it's just so populated, and like, there is a real monopoly in the BR genre now that Fortnite, Apex, Warzone, you're just not going to beat those games. Like, it's just, unless some like sort of miracle happens, I don't see another BR coming out that, stands up to them. And even PUBG still has a lot of players as well. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think that genre is sort of dead in terms of new games, but I think people are still itching for that type of experience. Just that, I don't know what you would even define it as, but like those really intense, like one life type of game modes. Even in Call of Duty, they have like search and destroy is still one of the most popular modes, because you just, once you die, you're done. And yeah, I just think people will always love that purely from the like adrenaline. Like, it's almost like it's deeply embedded into our brains because like of what it does to your body when you're in those moments. The pure freaking adrenaline pumping through your veins when you're in a final circle of a BR. That is what people are like chasing now. Like, I miss that. I miss that, like, just almost pure fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And unfortunately, a lot of the other games that provide that, I don't love them anymore. Warzone's really dropped off, and I never really got like super into Apex or Fortnite. So I'm sort of like, I want that again. That's why I'm so keen that's why I sort of bring up a BR for the finals, even though I don't want them to do a typical BR, but just something where that happens again, where it's like you're on the edge of your seat. I think people still want that experience. It's just that not so much a BR. And if they can find a way to spin that feeling into a new, like a completely new mode, then they could this could be the next like PUBG or Fortnite that could take them to like, you know, the proper AAA status where it's looked at as like, oh my God, the finals is up there with, you know, Apex and Fortnite. Because, you know, 10 years ago, it was just Call of Duty, Halo, Battlefield. Now when you look at it, Fortnite and Apex are arguably bigger than all of those. Maybe not still Call of Duty.
Easily.
But like, yeah.
Call of Duty aside, but.
Yeah. So like,
I would question whether the player base of Apex or Fortnite would rival that of Call of Duty, though.
I think they would. I think like they all go sort of through peaks and troughs where they interchange a bit, but definitely peak Fortnite is as big as Call of Duty. And I'd say peak Apex was probably, I think even during Warzone 1, they were like neck and neck. So it's definitely close. And like, that's kind of what I mean, that those games did just come out of nowhere. I know Apex is based on Titanfall, but Titanfall even wasn't successful. You know, as good as it wasn't successful.
It was like the if you know kind of game.
Yeah. And so realistically, Fortnite and Apex just came out of nowhere and they're now up there. So why can't the finals do that as well? So if they can make some sort of, you know, experience or even just really refine what they've done and just keep bringing people in, I don't see why that can't be up there in that category, because it might sound dumb comparing the finals to Fortnite, but before 2017, no one knew what Fortnite was. So it can definitely happen. And I think the finals is a high enough quality game that I don't see any reason why it can't do that. And also, like we said, it is backed by Nexon, who I think they're worth like $2.6 billion or something. They're like a South Korean massive company. So yeah, hopefully it can reach that. Because I definitely think it deserves it. But yeah, for some reason, it's just at the moment not really. It's weird. It's not really going anywhere, but it's also not dying off. It is just currently like a smaller game, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. And if it stays that forever, that's still fine. But I'd love to see it sort of break in, and I just think it deserves more eyes on it, to be honest. It's such a good experience.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And like, that kind of this discussion kind of leads perfectly into the next topic of like, there's been a heavily discussed topic in the gaming space online recently around how Call of Duty lost the plot. Pretty sure that they've lost the plot. Like, that's a discussion that's been going on after they added basically like velociraptors into the game. People started questioning on like, this is kind of just not Call of Duty anymore. It's feeling more like Fortnite than anything.
Yeah, it's, to me, like, so I saw those tweets the other day, and I find it weird that was the one that made people think that.
Yeah, that was the straw that broke the camel's back or something.
There's
like that one.
There's been literal, like, you can be a literal cat in previous games and stuff. And like,
yeah, or a tree person.
Yeah, like, I don't know. That one, it looked cool. Like, I completely agree. It's like, I don't want to. Call of Duty is meant to be like a somewhat realistic shooter in terms of not so much the gameplay, but like the setting has always
realistic with a lowercase r.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not so much the gameplay, but the setting was always, you know, it was a real modern day war, and like the story of those games is relatively realistic. Yet it doesn't. Yeah, it definitely hasn't been that way for a long time. Even 2020 with Warzone, there was the waifu skins where it's like, yeah, like anime girl stuff. So I don't know why this is the one that's only just now made people realize that, but it has lost its way a long time ago. Not even just in terms of the tone, but just everything about the franchise for me. It's just dropped off so much. And I think Warzone 1 kind of revitalized it and brought it back, especially not even only just that, but Modern Warfare, like the reboot as well, sort of brought it back a bit. And for a minute there, it was like, oh, okay, Call of Duty's back, even though I think Modern Warfare 2019 sucks, the actual game, but it felt good. The gunplay was good. and it translated really well to Warzone, and Warzone 1 was one of the biggest hits ever.
Perfect timing of a game.
Yeah, so that made it feel like it has only been the last few years that it's been dropping off, but for me, like, it's been like that since like 2014, 2013. Black Ops 2 really, for me, is the last, which is 2012, I want to say. No, 2013. That was the last Call of Duty that was like really good, and it's just gone downhill from there. And even back, like Black Ops 3 even, in the same sub-franchise, in the Black Ops franchise, you could have like the weirdest skins, and there was like the operators where it went from just being a typical Call of Duty to that one was a bit more futuristic, and you could play as like a robot and stuff. It's just gone slowly but surely downhill over the last that's now a decade essentially. And then Warzone kind of saved it. So I think people are only just thinking now that it's gone downhill. Maybe also a lot of people only started playing in the Warzone days, so they didn't experience that initial downfall. But
Warzone converted me, man.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people personally who never played a lot of the older ones too, and then Warzone got them in there. So maybe that's why it's only just sort of gaining a bit of traction, that like, oh, what the hell was going on with Call of Duty? But it was doing that, in like 2014, 15, 16, it was really going a bit off track. And I guess that's just the thing with yearly releases, and there's essentially like 20 Call of Duties at this point. And I think you just can't have that many of something without it just sort of falling off. It's not even to do with them like failing. I just think there's just too many, and they just need a genuine break. You look at like Assassin's Creed, where that was having the same issue. They took a break, and now they've kind of revitalized Assassin's Creed a lot. So I don't know. I just think as long as they're doing yearly releases, it's just not going to be it for me. They need to like have, as much as they won't because it's their moneymaker, they need to just have like, I don't know, 3 years off and just come back with a massive bang, because obviously they'd lose a lot of money in there.
That was the intention, was to actually have a gap.
Which was meant to be last year, and then, obviously that didn't happen. Look, as much as they would lose potential profit in that period, imagine the scenes of a comeback Call of Duty, like 3 years without a COD after like 20 years, and then I don't know, that would be the biggest moment in gaming when Call of Duty comes back. So I think that they should do that, and they would lose like essentially billions, so they're not going to do it. But I don't know if they could find it. Look, they've still got like Call of Duty Mobile that is massive, and like if they could still support the BRs,
I always forget about, but it's insanely huge.
It's freaking massive, and it actually looks like, as much as a mobile shooter can be good, it looks genuinely like pretty fun. So like if they just took the time,
I know people that legit only play COD in that form, and it blows my mind. It's
apparently like super not only just popular in the mobile scene, but a lot of people who actually play console games and that too apparently go and play it and say like, this is genuinely a really good game. I think it's just because the mobile stigma that a lot of like the hardcore console and PC players won't ever transition.
It's not real gaming, man.
So, but if they could just focus on that for their money and like, I don't know, keep supporting the BR. Like you don't have to just not make any Call of Duty, but I just think that would be huge for the franchise. Not only would it reset it, that hopefully they could make the next one like really good, but that whole thing where like say with like Twitch streamers getting banned all the time, but like when they make their comeback stream, they come back bigger. They get more people watching because they're like, damn, this guy got banned. I'm gonna go, like he's back today.
It's free marketing for him.
So like, just imagine that. I think they would just break every record with a comeback like 3 years from now if they just hadn't released any, and they reboot like the Black Ops franchise and they come back with Call of Duty Black Ops. It's just called that, or like just call it Call of Duty or something, and people would flip, and it would break every record on
the hype would be insane.
Yeah, and even me, I would like. I've been so negative about Call of Duty for years now. I would love that. I'd be pre-ordering the freaking deluxe edition and buying that day one, because that is what that franchise needs. And even if it was a flop, I'd still buy it, and like I want to experience that. That's like
you'd convince yourself it was great.
Yeah, it's like a historic moment in gaming that I think everyone would just want to be a part of. To be like, it's like GTA 6. Like everyone will buy that game. Every single person who plays games will buy GTA, because it'll be the biggest piece of media ever made. And Call of Duty is the only game that really goes head to head with the Rockstar games. And like, I don't know, I would love to see them do that, but yeah, they never will, because they will lose so much money, or not lose money, but like lose potential profit. So
yeah,
unfortunately, that's the way gaming has gone. Where it was always a business, but it was a business with passion.
It's been so much more clearly a business.
It's now only a
2 years, maybe.
It used to be a business and an art form. Now it's just a business, unfortunately, for most studios. So, and like, I get it. It's, if you're making billions, like if I was in charge of Call of Duty, even as much as I say I'd make him take a break, I probably wouldn't, because I'd get sacked. So, like, yeah, I understand it, but I think it's annoying, and yeah, it's just a shame to see that franchise continue to fall, even though like people will say it won't, because it breaks its records every year because more people buy it, and that doesn't mean it's good. People buy a lot of things that aren't good. And yeah, I wish they would do something to fix it, because that game is my childhood. That franchise, I probably love the Battlefield franchise more now, but like, man, take me back to early Call of Duty days. I didn't care about Battlefield at all. I loved, like, that's the franchise that got me so deeply into gaming. And to see it, it's kind of like seeing your child like making friends with people they shouldn't be making friends with, and oh, this is going to go bad. Like, I don't know. It's frustrating, but I'm glad people are calling it out with all those tweets saying like, what the hell is this? Like, this is a bit stupid.
I think it's a good time for people to be talking about these kinds of things. And can Call of Duty have waifu people running around, or velociraptor people running around? Totally. But also, you can't have like one without like getting rid of the other. Like, you can't have velociraptor people running around and still be like, Call of Duty is the legitimate serious shooter. It's like, that's just not it now. Be honest about what you are. And I just think it's an interesting discussion to be had with gaming at this point, with the criticisms, fairly so, of something like Call of Duty, of something like the decisions made in response to Call of Duty, and the dwindling newcomer experience for games, like that article, research that came out that the top 10 games that people played last year were like mostly older than 7 years or something like that. I think it's just very fascinating to see what kind of experiences we are having in gaming right now. And something as big as Call of Duty is going to set the standard for a lot of these experiences. So whatever Call of Duty does is going to impact the gaming space no matter what they do. Yeah,
people pay attention to Call of Duty, not just us as players, but like even those at like Epic Games and stuff making Fortnite, they look at what Call of Duty does. I'd say the only company out there that probably doesn't care is Rockstar. They do their own thing. They don't care. But like every other company, and no matter what genre, even the single player genre, I've seen a lot of people actually who make devs talking about their interest in the way that Call of Duty handles itself and stuff. So yeah, that's why I want them to do that, because like they have the potential to like set the standard in terms of if they do take a break. It was kind of like with Assassin's Creed where they did that. Ubisoft's big enough that people took note of that and went, oh damn, like they're taking a step back to make this franchise good again. And if Call of Duty did that, because like when Ubisoft did it, it was big, but if Call of Duty did that, man, so many people would look at that and go, oh, okay, like maybe this is about more than just the money. Maybe we have to make a good product to make the money. Because if Call of Duty would say no to money to make a better product, every other company would be stupid not to listen to that, because Call of Duty is making infinite money right now. So I wish they would do it. They won't. That's just how, and especially that's owned by Microsoft now. That like, I'm a big Microsoft fan in terms of the Xbox, but the Microsoft, like the company, it's the biggest company in the world. So their goal is to make literally as much money as possible. And yeah, if they're
legally required to do so.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the key issue there. What I just said earlier about how games used to be like more of an art form. Once like investors really took hold of it, then it's like out of anyone's control, because you have to kind of succumb to the investors because they own the company essentially. So yeah, it's frustrating, but it's interesting to think about anyway. Like that's a cool thought to have, of like Call of Duty taking a break and just this absolute scenes of that making a comeback, and like I think that would rival GTA 6 as like the biggest launch ever if they were to take a break and come back with a game just called Call of Duty or something. But unfortunately, I don't think that will ever see the light of day.
Yeah, it would definitely be shocking. But as we're seeing like longer times in between game releases, as we're seeing, I think the average time for a game to be developed now is like 7 or 8 years or something along those lines, from scratch. That's not taking into account like existing infrastructure or anything, but like from ideation to release, the average is like 7 or 8 years in the game industry right now. So like, as we're getting more examples of that, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, after these kind of like subpar half releases, if you look at what Modern Warfare 3 was like, I think we might be in a future here soon where that just becomes the standard of these games and studios releasing and them taking longer. If you look at something like Naughty Dog, that's why they release the remakes so frequently, is those remakes fund the future new stuff. Yeah. That's why The Last of Us has been remade 70,000 times. It's because they make money every time with that, and they don't have to put a ton of work into it. Yeah. And that's why Uncharted is about to get re-released, is so they can fund whatever The Last of Us 3 is going to be. Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing with like Skyrim has been released freaking on every platform. It's on.
You can play it on an Samsung. Alexa.
Yeah. Play it on a Samsung fridge at this point. So
yeah.
Like, yeah. It makes me wonder, because even look at Battlefield, they're taking an extra year with this than they've ever taken before to make the next game. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder if Call of Duty will have to do that, or if they're just going to stick to it. And I think that would just get worse and worse. They're just going to continue to get worse if they do one every year, unless they were to bring on a fourth studio or something. But yeah, I don't know. Same with like FIFA and that. I just think that game is just the same game every year. They update the rosters for who's changed teams and change the menu, and that's really much all they do. So, it's going to be interesting in like 10 years from now, where I think games will just we're saying how they're getting longer to make now. I think in 10 years it'll be even longer, and I wonder if these games can keep up with that, or if they are going to have to go, oh damn, we might have to do every 2 years we release one or whatever. But yeah, I can't see that happening. I genuinely can't ever see a year where Call of Duty doesn't release a game. I believed them when they said they were taking a year off, because they said it publicly, but they didn't do that. So now I just don't think they'll ever do that. I just think if they didn't stick true to that, why would they ever do it? Because they released Modern Warfare 3 and it financially did well. So like, why would they realistically, why would they? They just can print money every year. So it's like, oh, let's just put out this garbage and we'll just make more money. So yeah, I just kind of see a future where they skip a year, and I think that's just only going to make the franchise worse, unfortunately.
Yep, I totally agree. Do they need to do it? Yes. Will they? Probably not. But we shall see. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact@uplinkpodcast.com if you're listening to this wherever you find podcasts. As always, check out Sammy Boy's YouTube channels. Those will be in the description of this episode. And if you're into Star Wars, check out Star Wars Uplink, our Star Wars podcast. As always, we'll see you later, video gamers.